Number. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, tucked between a water bill and a grocery store circular. I almost missed it. I almost threw it away without opening it. But something made me stop. The return address. It was my son's home address, but the name in the upper left corner was not his. It was the name of a law firm. I stood at my kitchen counter in my robe, the coffee still brewing behind me, and I read the first line twice because I was certain I had misread it. I hadn't. My son Daniel was filing a formal complaint against me for interference with his family's right to privacy and peaceful enjoyment of their home. He was requesting a restraining order. He wanted a judge to decide how close I was allowed to get to my own grandchildren. I set the letter down on the counter. I listened to the coffee maker finish its cycle. I poured myself a cup, and I sat at my kitchen table in the house where I had lived for 31 years, and I did not cry. I think I was too stunned to cry. I just sat there thinking about the last time I had seen Daniel's face, really seen it, not guarded or cold or carefully blank, and I couldn't remember when that had been. I am 68 years old. I worked as a registered nurse for 34 years, most of them night shifts at Mercy General in Clarksville, Tennessee. I raised Daniel mostly alone after his father, Raymond, passed from a cardiac event when Daniel was 11. I worked doubles on holidays so that I could save enough money to send Daniel to the University of Tennessee. I attended every single one of his graduations, high school, college, law school, in the same good wool coat because I couldn't afford a new one. I sat in those auditorium seats and I clapped until my hands ached, and I thought, Raymond would have been so proud. Daniel became a family attorney. The irony of that is not lost on me now. He married Serena 6 years ago. She is polished, careful with her words, and very particular about her home. I tried from the beginning to respect that. I brought hostess gifts when I visited. I called before coming. I complimented her cooking even when it needed salt. I wanted her to feel that I was not a threat, not a competitor, just a mother who was grateful her son had found someone to build a life with. For a while, things were manageable. Then the grandchildren came. Their daughter Lily was born 4 years ago, and their son Cooper arrived 19 months after that. The moment I held Lily for the first time in that hospital room, something cracked open in my chest that has never fully closed. She had Raymond's ears. She had his little turned-up nose. I sat in the chair beside Serena's bed and I held that baby and I thought, here you are. I have been waiting for you. I will admit something that I did not admit even to myself for a long time. I became, in those years, perhaps more present than they wanted. I drove the 40 minutes to Clarksville from my house in Erin every weekend. I showed up sometimes without a specific plan, just wanting to be near them. I would see that Cooper's diaper bag needed restocking, and I would restock it. I would notice that their pantry was low on certain things, and I would quietly fill it. I thought I was being helpful. I thought I was showing love in the only language I had ever known, which was action, which was doing. Looking back, I can see that I didn't always ask. I didn't always wait. I wanted so badly to be needed that I sometimes didn't notice when I wasn't. But even as I sit here and examine my own role honestly, I know that what came next was not a proportionate response. What came next was not something any mother should have to face. It started with a phone call from Daniel about 8 months before the letter arrived. He was measured and formal in the way that he gets when he is preparing an argument, rather than having a conversation. He said that he and Serena had discussed it, and they felt I was visiting too frequently. He said the children needed routine. He said Serena felt that I sometimes overstepped. He gave examples. I had reorganized the snack cabinet once because I noticed the kids were grabbing chips before dinner. I had signed Lily up for a Saturday art class at the community center. I had paid for it myself, without asking first. I had driven past the school during a winter carnival just to watch Lily's class perform their little song, standing in the back of the gymnasium, not approaching them, not speaking to anyone, just watching. He said that last one in particular had upset Serena enormously. I listened to everything he said. I told him I understood. I told him I was sorry for anything that felt intrusive. I told him I would pull back and give them more space. And I meant it. I genuinely meant it. I stopped the weekend visits. I called before I came and I came far less often. I did not go to the school again. I filled no more pantries. I waited to be invited. For 3 months, I sat in my house in Erin, and I waited, and the invitations came rarely and briefly and always with a schedule attached. 1 hour on a Sunday afternoon, Lily's birthday party for exactly 2 hours with a 4 p.m. end time noted specifically. I followed every boundary, every single one. And then, in April, Lily turned 4 years old. I had been planning her gift for months. Not something extravagant. I know better than that. A handmade quilt, squares of fabric in her favorite colors, pink and yellow, and a soft sage green. I had sewn it myself over the winter. I had put a small pocket on the back and tucked inside it a card with a message I had written to her about the day she was born and what she meant to me. Something she could keep. Something she could have when I was gone. I also, and this is the part that Daniel's letter cited specifically, I also set up a small education savings account in Lily's name and Cooper's name. I had been contributing to it quietly for 2 years, not large amounts, whatever I could spare from my pension. I sent them each a card explaining what I had done. I addressed the cards to the children themselves. That was apparently the final breach. Daniel called me 3 days after the birthday party. He did not sound measured this time. He said I had gone behind their backs. He said I had no right to open financial accounts for his children without his consent. He said the cards I sent directly to the children were manipulative, that I was attempting to create secret communication channels, that I was deliberately undermining his and Serena's authority as parents. I said, Daniel, I opened savings accounts with my own money for my grandchildren's future education. He said that wasn't the point. I asked him what was the point. He said the point was that I could not seem to respect a single boundary they set, that every time they tried to create a little space, I found a new way to intrude, and that they had spent 2 years trying to handle this privately, and they were done trying. The line went quiet for a moment. Then he said, we're going to have to handle this another way. I did not know what that meant until the letter arrived. I called my friend Paulette that afternoon. Paulette and I have been friends since nursing school. She is the kind of person who listens before she speaks, which is rarer than people think. I sat on my back porch and I told her everything, and when I was finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Margaret, did he actually retain counsel against his own mother over a savings account? I told her the letter was on my kitchen counter. She drove to Erin the next day. She sat at my table and she read the letter and she set it down and she looked at me with an expression I recognized from the hospital. The look you give someone when the news is bad and there is nothing to soften it with. She said, you need a lawyer. I didn't want a lawyer. I wanted my son to call me and say he'd made a terrible mistake. I wanted Serena to understand that I was not her enemy. I wanted to sit on the floor with Lily and Cooper and build something with blocks and have nobody keep track of the minutes. But Paulette is a practical woman, and she was right, so I called a lawyer. Her name was Helen Marsh. She had been practicing family law in Nashville for 22 years, and she told me in our first meeting, quite a lot. When I finished explaining the situation, she folded her hands on her desk and she looked at me steadily. She said, let me understand this correctly. They are arguing that a grandmother who sends birthday quilts and education savings accounts and attended a public school carnival constitutes an actionable violation of their privacy. I said yes. She said, all right. She was not warm exactly, but she was thorough and she was honest and she did not treat me like I was fragile, which I needed. She went through everything. She asked me to document every visit, every call, every gift. She asked me whether Daniel had ever at any point told me explicitly that the education accounts were forbidden. He had not. She asked me whether the school carnival was a public event open to the community. It was. She asked whether I had ever been asked to leave their property and refused. I never had. She told me that what Daniel was filing would be difficult to sustain before a judge and that she would be prepared. The weeks before the hearing were the loneliest of my life, including the weeks after Raymond died. When Raymond died, I had Daniel. I had something to hold on to, something that needed me. Now I sat in my house in Erin, and I did not know whether I would be permitted to see my grandchildren again. And there was nothing to hold on to at all except the quilt I had made for Lily that they had apparently returned to me by mail without a note. I unfolded it sometimes in the evenings, and I ran my hands over the fabric. I had chosen each square carefully. Pink for Lily's favorite color. Yellow because she had told me once that yellow was the color of happy. Sage green because it was the color of the blanket she carried everywhere as a toddler. Soft and worn thin at the edges, and I wanted her to feel something familiar. I thought about what I might have done differently. Not for the lawyer's sake. She didn't need my self-reflection, but for my own. I thought about the snack cabinet. I thought about the art class. I thought about standing in the back of that gymnasium in the cold, not speaking, not approaching, just needing to see her face in the lights. Was that too much? Was simply wanting to exist near the people I loved an act of aggression? I didn't have an answer. I still don't, entirely. But I know the difference between a mistake and a crime. And I know that what I did came from love, not from a desire for control. I know that in my bones. The hearing was on a Wednesday in November. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Daniel sat at the table on the other side with his attorney, a younger man in a good suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Daniel did not look at me when I came in. He looked at the table in front of him, and I looked at the side of his face, the face I had watched sleep in a hospital bassinet 67 years of days ago, and I felt something that was not quite grief and not quite anger. Something older than both. Helen presented our case methodically. She went through the documented visits, their frequency, their nature. She submitted records showing that I had honored the reduced visit agreement for the full 3 months following Daniel's phone call. She submitted the letters I had sent to Lily and Cooper about the education accounts and asked the court to note that the tone was that of a grandmother sharing a gift, not a conspirator creating covert channels. She submitted a statement from the director of the community center confirming that the art class I had enrolled Lily in was open to the public and regularly utilized by grandparents. She submitted the carnival program confirming it was a community event. Daniel's attorney made his arguments. He used words like pattern of intrusion and failure to respect established limits and emotionally manipulative behavior. He said the education accounts were an attempt to create financial dependency and loyalty in minor children. He said the cards addressed to the children directly were designed to circumvent parental authority. I sat very still and I listened to my love for my grandchildren be described in those terms, and I thought about Raymond, who never once in his life would have let this happen, and I missed him so completely in that moment that it was almost physical. The judge was a woman. Her name was the Honorable Carol Briggs, and she had gray hair pulled back and reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and she had been listening with the specific quality of attention that experienced judges have, which is total and unreadable. When Daniel's attorney finished, she looked over her glasses at the table for a long moment. Then she spoke. She said she had reviewed the documentation thoroughly. She said she found no evidence of harassment, no evidence of trespass, no evidence of any behavior that would meet the legal threshold for the relief being requested. She said attending a public school event is not an act of surveillance. She said gifting grandchildren with education savings is not financial manipulation. She said sending cards to minor grandchildren in the absence of any court order restricting communication is a grandmother sending cards. She paused. Then she said something that I have turned over in my mind every day since. She said she wanted to note, for the record, that courts exist to protect people from genuine harm. She said the law is not a tool for managing family disappointment or enforcing preferred emotional distances. She said that a mother who shows up, who saves, who sews quilts and fills out enrollment forms and stands in the back of a gymnasium to watch a 4-year-old sing, that mother is not a problem to be litigated. She said, in her experience, the families who fight hardest to keep grandparents out are sometimes the families who will one day regret it most. She denied the request. I heard Daniel exhale beside his attorney. I don't know what that exhale meant. Relief, maybe, or something breaking loose that had been held very tight. Helen touched my arm and I nodded, and I looked at my hands in my lap. Outside the courthouse, the November air was cold and still, and the trees along the street had gone bare. Helen said the ruling was clean and that I should feel confident about my position going forward. I thanked her. I meant it. I drove home alone. I didn't call Paulette right away. I just drove through the gray afternoon, back to Erin, back to my house with its 31 years of quiet and its kitchen counter where a letter had arrived on a Tuesday and changed something between me and my son that I don't know if either of us will fully repair. I did not hear from Daniel for 6 days. On the 7th day he called. He didn't say much. He said he needed some time to think. I told him I understood. I told him I was not going anywhere. I told him, which is true, that I am not angry at him. I am sad, and I am tired, and I am still his mother, and those 3 things will all be true on the last day of my life. He said okay. Then he said okay. Then he said in this part I was not prepared for. He said that Lily had been asking about me, that she had apparently been collecting things, small things. A drawing she made of the 2 of us holding hands, a piece of ribbon from the birthday quilt that must have come loose, a note she had dictated to Serena asking when Grandma Margaret was coming back, folded up and kept in the little wooden box on her nightstand where she kept her most important belongings. He said he found it when he was tucking her in, and she told him very seriously that she was saving it for me. I sat in my kitchen and I listened to my son's voice tell me about my granddaughter's small wooden box, and I thought about all the things that survive the things we do to each other. The ribbon, the folded note, the yellow that is the color of happy. I don't know what comes next for my family. I know that healing is not a straight line, and that there are things between Daniel and me that will have to be looked at carefully and honestly before they can be put down. I know that I am not entirely without fault, and I know that fault is not the same as malice. I know that love expressed imperfectly is still love. What I know most certainly is this. Somewhere in Clarksville, in a little wooden box on a nightstand, there is a folded piece of paper with my granddaughter's words on it. She saved it for me. She didn't know whether I was coming back, and she saved it for me anyway. I will spend whatever time I have left being worthy of that. If you are sitting somewhere today feeling like a burden to the people you love most, hear me when I say this. Your presence matters. Your history matters. The quilts you make and the accounts you fill and the gymnasiums you stand in the back of in the cold. All of it matters. Don't let anyone convince you that loving people too much makes you a problem to be solved. Let the record show that you showed up. Let the record show that you stayed. That is not nothing. That is everything.